Have you ever wondered why certain emotions feel so familiar, even when they don't match your current reality? Do you find yourself reacting to situations in ways that surprise even you, as if some invisible force is pulling the strings of your emotional responses? Why do some of us carry burdens that feel too heavy for our own life experiences alone? Thank you for clicking on this video, and welcome to Not What It Seems, where you'll receive daily content that challenges the way we see ourselves and the world around us. Today, we're diving deep into a truth that might reshape how you understand your own emotional landscape. The phrase, "your trauma didn't start with you, but you carry it anyway," isn't just a poetic observation. It's a profound reality that affects millions of people worldwide. Based on the groundbreaking work of Dr. Gabor Maté and decades of research in trauma psychology, we're beginning to understand that our emotional inheritance runs much deeper than we ever imagined. Think of trauma like an invisible river that flows through generations, carrying with it the unprocessed pain, fear, and survival strategies of those who came before us. When we talk about inherited trauma, we're not speaking metaphorically. Scientific research has shown us that traumatic experiences can actually alter our genetic expression through a process called epigenetics. Imagine your DNA as a vast library of books, and trauma as a librarian that decides which books get pulled from the shelves and which ones remain closed. The experiences of your parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents can influence which genetic books are opened in your own life, affecting everything from your stress response to your emotional regulation patterns. But what does this mean for you personally? It means that the anxiety you feel when someone raises their voice might not just be about your own experiences with conflict. The way you freeze up in confrontational situations could be your nervous system responding to dangers that your ancestors faced, even if you've never personally encountered those same threats. Your body carries the memory of survival, and sometimes that memory doesn't distinguish between past and present dangers.
Consider how a tree's roots extend far beyond what we can see above ground. In the same way, your emotional roots reach back through generations, drawing from a complex network of experiences, beliefs, and survival patterns. When your grandmother lived through war, famine, or persecution, her nervous system adapted to survive those threats. Those adaptations didn't just help her survive, they became part of the legacy she passed down, woven into the very fabric of how her descendants would experience and respond to the world. This inheritance isn't just about the big, obvious traumas either. Sometimes the most profound impacts come from what Dr. Maté calls small t traumas, the everyday experiences of emotional neglect, chronic stress, or growing up in environments where authentic expression wasn't safe. A parent who learned to suppress their emotions to survive their own childhood will unconsciously teach their children the same emotional patterns, not through words, but through the thousand small interactions that make up daily life. You might be wondering, if this trauma isn't originally mine, why do I have to deal with it? This question touches the heart of what it means to be human and connected to others across time. We don't exist as isolated individuals. We're part of an ongoing story that began long before we were born. The traits that helped your ancestors survive might be the very patterns that create struggle in your current life, but they're also evidence of incredible resilience and strength. Think about it this way. If your great-grandfather learned to be hypervigilant to survive a dangerous environment, that hypervigilance might have saved his life and allowed him to have children. But if you've inherited that same hypervigilant nervous system, it might show up as anxiety in your safe, modern life. The very mechanism that ensured your existence might also be the source of your current emotional challenges. This isn't cruel irony, it's the complex dance of survival and adaptation that makes us human. The beautiful thing about understanding inherited trauma is that awareness creates the possibility for healing. When you realize that your intense reaction to criticism might be carrying the echo of your mother's childhood shame, or that your difficulty trusting others might be protecting you from dangers your father once faced, you can begin to separate what belongs to you from what you're carrying for others. This doesn't minimize your experience, it actually honors both your pain and the pain of those who came before you.
But how do we begin to heal something that started before we were even born? The answer lies in understanding that while we inherit these patterns, we also have the power to transform them. Every time you choose to respond differently than your automatic programming suggests, you're not just changing your own life, you're potentially changing the trajectory for future generations. Healing trauma is rarely just about the individual. It's about breaking cycles that may have been repeating for decades or even centuries. Dr. Maté often speaks about the difference between what happened to us and what we do with what happened to us. This distinction becomes even more profound when we consider inherited trauma. You didn't choose to carry these patterns, but you do have a choice about how consciously you engage with them. The unconscious becomes conscious through awareness, and consciousness creates the space for new choices. One of the most powerful aspects of this understanding is how it can shift us from blame to compassion. When you realize that your parents were also carrying invisible burdens from their own ancestors, it becomes easier to see their limitations not as personal failures, but as the natural result of trying to love and protect their children while navigating their own inherited wounds. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it can free you from the exhausting work of trying to figure out why someone who was supposed to love you couldn't show up in the way you needed. The process of healing inherited trauma often involves learning to feel safe in your own body first. For many people carrying ancestral wounds, the body has become a place of hypervigilance rather than home. Simple practices like conscious breathing, gentle movement, or spending time in nature can begin to teach your nervous system that the old dangers have passed, that it's safe to relax the ancient guardedness that once served your ancestors so well. If you're going through this situation and feel you want to add to our content, write in the comments about your experiences. I'd love to read your comment. Understanding inherited trauma also helps explain why traditional talk therapy sometimes isn't enough on its own. If trauma lives in the body and the nervous system, healing often requires approaches that work with the body's wisdom, not just the mind's understanding. This might include somatic therapies, mindfulness practices, or other body-based healing modalities that help you develop a new relationship with the physical sensations and emotions you've inherited. But here's something crucial to understand. Inheriting trauma doesn't doom you to repeat it. In fact, the opposite can be true. When you become conscious of these patterns, you become what we might call a cycle breaker, someone who takes responsibility for transforming inherited pain into wisdom. This isn't always easy work, and it certainly isn't always comfortable, but it's some of the most meaningful work a human being can do. The concept of post-traumatic growth becomes especially relevant here. Just as a forest fire can clear the undergrowth and make space for new growth, consciously engaging with inherited trauma can lead to profound personal transformation. Many people find that understanding their inherited patterns actually increases their sense of compassion, resilience, and connection to something larger than themselves. There's also something deeply healing about recognizing that you're not alone in carrying these burdens. Millions of people around the world are walking around with nervous systems that are responding to threats their ancestors faced. There's nothing wrong with you if you find yourself struggling with anxiety, depression, or relationship difficulties that seem disproportionate to your actual life experiences. Your system is doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect you based on the information it has received. This understanding can also transform how we think about our own children and the legacy we want to leave. When you realize that healing your own trauma isn't just about your personal well-being, but about what you pass forward, it can provide motivation for the difficult work of change. Every pattern you heal is a gift to future generations, even if they never know the struggles you overcame to give them that gift. The process of healing inherited trauma often involves grieving, not just for your own losses, but for the losses of those who came before you. You might find yourself crying for a grandmother's unexpressed sorrow, or feeling anger about injustices that affected your family before you were born. This grief is sacred work. It's how we honor the pain that was carried so that we could exist, and it's how we begin to set it down. One of the most profound shifts that can happen when we understand inherited trauma is the movement from victim to ancestor. Instead of seeing yourself only as someone who has been impacted by generational patterns, you begin to see yourself as someone who has the power to influence the generational patterns that will follow you. This shift in perspective can be incredibly empowering and can provide meaning even in the midst of difficult healing work. It's important to remember that healing inherited trauma doesn't mean you need to have all the details about what happened to your ancestors. Sometimes families have kept secrets, or records have been lost, or stories have been too painful to tell. But the body remembers what the mind has forgotten, and you can work with the patterns you notice in your own life without needing to know all the historical details. Your nervous system will guide you toward what needs attention. The journey of healing inherited trauma is not a linear path with a clear endpoint. It's more like tending a garden that has been growing wild for generations. Some days you'll make great progress, clearing old growth and planting new seeds. Other days you'll discover roots that go deeper than you expected. But each day of conscious tending makes a difference, not just for the garden, but for everyone who will walk through it after you. As we come to the end of our exploration today, I want you to consider this. The very fact that you're here, listening to these ideas, thinking about these patterns, is evidence that something in you is ready to break cycles that may have been repeating for generations. Your willingness to look at these difficult truths with curiosity rather than judgment is already a form of healing, both for yourself and for the ancestral line you carry within you.
The trauma didn't start with you, but the healing can. And that healing doesn't have to be perfect or complete to be meaningful. Every moment of awareness, every choice to respond differently than your programming suggests, every act of self-compassion in the face of inherited pain, these are all forms of sacred activism, quietly changing the world one nervous system at a time. Remember, you are not broken because you carry these patterns. You are human, connected across time to people who loved you enough to survive so that you could exist. Their survival strategies live in you, but so does their strength, their resilience, and their capacity for love. You have everything you need within you to transform inherited wounds into inherited wisdom. If this content resonated with you today, please give it a like to let me know it was helpful. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with inherited patterns in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you're feeling called to join our community here at Not What It Seems, consider subscribing for daily content that explores the deeper truths of human experience. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. And remember, your healing matters, not just for you, but for all of us.